Hey, morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Public Safety Committee, Los Angeles City Council. I'm Councilman Smith, Chairman, joined by Council Member Dennis P. Zine, who is here on time. Zine on time, that's your new nickname.
That's good.
That's better. If you wish to speak on an item on today's agenda, please fill out one of the white cards and present it to the clerk so we may call your name. Otherwise, we won't hear from you. If you're here on item 1, 2, and 3, Councilman Zine, I'm recommending 1, 2, and 3 go on the consent calendar.
Yes.
Okay, so if you're here on 1, 2, and 3, those are deemed approved, and we'll move to the council with the recommendation of the chair of the committee, since we don't have a quorum yet. We don't have a quorum yet, so we will begin with items 4 and 5. We'll start with item 5 number first. For those of you in the audience, because we don't have a full quorum, any action this committee takes will go forward with the recommendation of the chairman of the committee. If we are joined by one more member, then we will have a quorum, and it will be an official action of the committee. So that we'll start with number 5.
Item 5, Board of Police Commissioners report relative to alternative mechanisms for deterring student truancy, daytime curfew citations, and related matters pursuant to motion Cardenas Parks.
How are you this morning, Commander?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you. Good morning, Commander George Villegas, Office of Operations. This report written by the Office of Operations on behalf of the Chief of Police, and that was forwarded through the Board of Police Commissioners, eventually ending up in this committee, was prepared last year in April pursuant to a request by Councilman Cardenas and this board. And essentially it discusses some of the statistical information that was requested as a result of the motion, and it talked about our move to work collaboratively with the school district, as well as the feasibility of establishing relationships with the school district and with other community stakeholders that are concerned with curfew and truancy. As a result, in about September of last year, we worked with members of the ACLU, members of the Public Council, and several community groups to develop a directive to specifically address curfew, daytime curfew ordinances. And as of this year, we ended up publishing a directive entitled Enforcement of Daytime Curfew and the Activation of the Curfew Ordinance Guidelines. And specifically, what it addresses is the spirit and focus of our efforts towards curfew enforcement. And it talks about ensuring that our efforts are consistent with moving towards looking that juveniles not be victims of crimes and not be participants in criminal activities. And we developed a curfew ordinance guideline so that all officers have access to questions so that they can have a better understanding of how to provide enforcement towards curfew.
When you say all officers, can you tell me what percentage of curfew violation citations are written by regular patrol officers versus a JCAR or a school police?
I don't believe we have that stat in terms of the differences. I would suggest, however, that the juvenile or the JCAR officers are not solely writing citations as it relates to curfew.
But it's been my experience that an overwhelming majority, if not in the 90 percentiles, probably is written by the JCARs versus regular patrol officers. So, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I think these people are really attuned to the issue, and you're working with a very finite number of people versus every patrol officer.
That's correct, but some of the issues that have been identified are a direct result of officers not being familiar with what the ordinance calls for in terms of exceptions to the specific ordinance.
Okay. So what are we doing in the way of retraining and or changing the way we patrol juvenile or curfew then?
Well, and that's what this particular directive is addressing, that for us to enforce the actual spirit of it and ensuring that we're not specifically targeting juveniles that are right in front of a school that happen to be late to school. Could
Yeah.
conceivably be someone who's absent from school, but be within a block or a half a block of a distance from a school. So that's gone out in terms of information to the bureau chiefs. It's gone out in terms of information to the area commanding officers, and we're following up with ongoing dialogue and discussion with the officers as well.
Okay. But if the officer sees them walking in the other direction, they're obviously not late going to school, so that's, just because they're a block away, it's not a reason to stop and not cite.
Correct, and that's what this order actually provides, is some flexibility in terms of there isn't a shall cite or a shall not cite, but rather to do a comprehensive investigation and make some determinations. Certainly someone that's walking towards school in a hurried fashion, even if they are 4 blocks away, within the spirit of this, should not be cited. Technically, they can be, but they shouldn't be.
You know, what is interesting, I did receive a couple letters, and it's obviously a number of the speakers are going to address this, so maybe you can address it now, but people that are homeschooled, they don't run on the same schedule, they don't have the same days of schooling, maybe the same hours certainly. Have you given any provision in your training for homeschooled students?
In the curfew guidelines, there's a section that specifically addresses homeschooling and some factors by which they should try to make contact and notification to the school district, and there's a phone number for state as well to try to identify if an individual is homeschooled or not. But quite frankly, that is a problematic issue. It's an issue that needs to be addressed at the school district level as well as the state.
Does the school district know who those kids are?
Not always.
Okay, because I mean, they're not on their roster. They don't get subsidy from the state for them, so they would have no way of knowing, probably, other than the kids been withdrawn from the public schools.
Right, and that's some of the information that's available versus via the phone numbers that they call.
You know, I would suggest that you might work with some of these associations, the homeschool associations, and you could develop some sort of identification card that they could give to their students, just like a student body card that every student has at the other schools, that would have the name of the responsible homeschool teacher, so that the field officer could just say, call Mrs. So-and-so and say, is this a homeschool student of yours? And they can say yes or no, so you know they're lying or not lying. That might be a good way to go. Mr. Cardenas, for the audio record, we've been joined by Councilman Cardenas now, which gives us a quorum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to cover the progress on this matter. And first, I'd like to thank LAPD for your new daytime curfew enforcement policy and its important step toward the Los Angeles students and their families basically getting back to school and not spending time in court, not spending time outside of school, because unfortunately that's what we want for our students, for them to just be in school. We want them to focus on their education. LAPD has been working on this matter since 2009. If we look in the record, you'll see that there have been some discussions and reports to the commission, the police commission, and it's really important for us to acknowledge not only the chief, but all of the staff that have been working on this. So I want to let you know how much we do appreciate this. And one of the things that people don't understand is that we're talking about a cooperation and an understanding between not only the city of Los Angeles and our policies, but our police department. The school police has their own police, correct? And it's actually a police department, correct?
Yes, and we've actually been working very diligently with the school district as well as the school police. In fact, as of last week, I know that Chief Hastings has had some extensive conversations with Chief Zipperman specifically as it relates to this.
So it's an understanding and an agreement that hopefully we'll be able to solidify in practice, not only with the school district and the city, but LAPD, LA School Police Department as well. In addition to that, is there any dialogue or working with the Sheriff's Department yet on this, as far as we know, as far as RPD is?
Well, we're participating with a truancy task force that's being sponsored by Judge Nash, and it has many stakeholders that are actually at those particular task force meetings. and the LA County is prominently represented. But I don't recall if there's an actual LA County sheriff who's actually attending, or deputy sheriff that's attending.
Okay. Well, hopefully they are engaged already, perhaps with the school district or what have you, but I think it'd be a great opportunity for us to engage with them directly, since we are the two largest policing agencies in the basin, being sheriffs and LAPD. So I'm sure, I know that the Chief Baca is very much understanding of these kinds of matters. We've seen his track record in the past, but I haven't personally been interacting with the Sheriff's Department. I know that at Judge Nash's meetings that he convenes, we do have a sheriff representative there. But hopefully we can also interact with them directly, maybe share some thoughts and share some policy changes that we've made. Maybe they have or haven't done that. Hopefully we can learn from them and they can learn from us. But at the crux of this whole matter is the fact that if a young person in this jurisdiction during school hours is walking on the street, whether it's to or from school, et cetera, whether they're loitering or not, it is in fact statute that they can be questioned, they can be given a ticket, and which results in a fine and also results in having to go to court. And not only does that young person have to go to court, actually the parents or the guardians have to go to court as well. But unfortunately, especially when you look at the poorest, hardest working families in our community, those individuals don't exactly get the flexibility of telling their boss, excuse me, but I have to take the day off. Some people actually, unfortunately, risk losing their job just for doing so. I'll give you an example of how painful it is to know that some people are still in that situation where they can't take a day off from work. I had the opportunity of speaking at USC where they were honoring parents, and they called it a hero award. These are parents who very likely never went to college themselves, and they were actually being given the opportunity to be awarded a hero award over at USC by an organization. And what happened was a couple of parents weren't able to make it. Even though they were given an award in the middle of the day, they couldn't make it. Why? Because they couldn't take a day off from work. So within that context, I just wanted to ask you if you could please explain to us what is the result if someone is ticketed, someone is given a citation, and do they have to show up to court? Is there a fine associated?
I believe they do have to go to court, and I believe there is a fine associated with or something, but that's not the realm and responsibility of the police department. I think that's something that happens during the court process. So someone else should be in a better position to address that or respond to that question.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking for the details of it. I'm just saying that it begs the question, and the reason why, one of the reasons why I think that it was appropriate and that our police department is handling their responsibilities and authorities differently from here forward, and that is that to understand whether or not that young person is actually on his or her way to school will make a difference as to whether or not they're cited, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And then also, if they are cited, then, as you mentioned, it's not the responsibility of our police department, but what ensues is other activities that do impact that young person's ability to show up to school. Because if they're in court on another day, then that means they're not in school on another day, as a result of perhaps running to school late, et cetera. One of the things, for example, that a police officer may ask somebody, why are they there at that time, et cetera. Is it possible, or if a young person were to explain, I'm taking bus number 933 and it's late, and they are in fact at a bus stop, could that be reason enough for the officer to believe that young person and actually not cite them?
Yes, it's a whole investigation. It's holistic. It isn't just that simple answer that they were giving you, because if they're in bus number 933 and it's going in the opposite direction, it's not going into to that specific school. There are a whole host of factors that would go into the investigation, but that certainly would play a role in this decision-making process for that officer.
Okay. And as a result of that, is it very likely, as we have a different level of interaction between the officer and the young person when they come across them, is it likely that we're probably going to have maybe a better understanding as to who's being cited and that they should be cited versus individuals who are no longer going to be cited just because of a strict black and white interpretation of, well, it's school hours, the person's not in school, they did identify that they go to that school a few blocks away, and I had to cite them. Is that going to be a big difference now?
It should be. Certainly, anytime we have officers who have discretion in terms of what they do, and there's a common sense approach to an application of any ordinance, in this case, the curfew ordinance, it gives you an ability to have a better relationship with whomever you're dealing with, and in this case, it is our young folks.
Okay. So I want to ask you some questions about, so that we can understand going forward, how much more knowledge and information we're going to have on this matter going forward. Do you currently have any way of tracking the time when citations are given to students traveling to school?
Yes.
Okay. So you do have an ability to track whether or not the majority of the sightings were done between 8 and 9 in the morning, or noon and 1 and 2, et cetera?
Yes, and that's part of this directive is for us to provide a quarterly report within the department to take a look at how the application of this directive is being handled and to see how appropriate it is or not. And one of those mechanisms is to actually look at the times of the citations.
Okay. And then there are truancy task forces, correct?
Curfew task forces.
I'm sorry, curfew task forces. And those, yeah, because truancy is another matter. The curfew task forces, those task forces going forward are going to change perhaps the time at which they do their operations?
Yes and no. Generally, task forces shouldn't occur within the first hour of school beginning, but task forces are going to be specifically directed at the locations that crimes are being committed when the target audience based upon the crime analysis is juveniles, and or where victims of crimes are juveniles. And in some cases, those aren't at the same or similar location to a school.
So there's going to be less intensity between, say, 8 and 9 o'clock than perhaps there was in the past?
Yes.
Okay. But certainly when it comes to hotspots or what have you, the PD is going to be determining in cooperation with who on that planning? On whether or not they're going to be doing certain activities?
Well, it's going to be the area commanding officer of every station is going to be actively involved in any time there's a specific task force, and that task force has to be directed specifically related to crimes that are being occurring, or hotspots, as you referred to them, that are specifically being committed by juveniles and or where juveniles are the victims of those crimes, whatever that task force is related to. And curfew is going to be one mechanism or one strategic tool to address that crime problem. That being said, with that type of involvement of a manager at the level of an area commanding officer, will ensure that there's appropriate management and oversight of task forces. The result will likely be, not having any of the results yet, is a reduction in the number of citations that we're actually writing.
Mm-hmm. And can you give a scenario, a quick example of what would be sufficient information for a sweep to be conducted at a certain, around a certain area or what have you?
Just anecdotal scenario, hypothetical would be if there was assault with deadly weapons that were occurring and there was a rash of them, they were consistent in the description of those suspects, whereas someone between the ages of 12 and 16, something to that effect, and it was at a specific time frame, 10 to 11 o'clock, 10 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We could set up as one strategy would be a curfew task force specifically to address that. Another one would be if we were having incidents of burglaries and the description of the suspects are juveniles, and that'd be another focus in terms of our task forces as well.
Okay. If a student were caught up in a sweep and the officer were to believe that the student was in fact truthfully explaining that they are traveling to or from school, does the officer have the discretion, even though it's a sweep, does the officer still have the discretion to decide whether or not they're going to cite that individual?
In any task force that we do, and specifically as it relates to this task force, the officer does have that discretion. And that's something, one of the factors when we do a task force specifically for curfew is the discussion of the spirit of this directive and the spirit of what we're actually targeting in terms of the suspects for those particular crimes that we're looking for. So the answer is yes.
Do you have any further policy recommendations or information you'd like to forward to this committee at this time?
Well, I would suggest that the focus of our governmental process that relates to curfew or truancy is that if one of the issues is, are we keeping kids away from being school because they're being cited, then what we need to look at is what the consequence of that citation is. And perhaps the consequence of the citation, rather than it be fee-based, that it be consequence or resource-based. In other words, that there's resources for those individuals that have been in violation of curfew or truancy or whatever the case may be. So it's something that someone else can focus on in terms of providing resources to all of our youth.
Well, that's a perfect example, and once again, I'd like to thank LAPD for sending the high-level commander, chief, to Judge Nash's meetings.
Commander, so
I'm sorry, what?
I'm still a commander.
Oh, okay. But Pasinger also has gone as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so commander and chief.
Yeah.
Assistant
Both
chief.
of us have attended at different times.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the police department for putting that level of attention on this matter. And it's not lost on me that without that level of attention, we wouldn't have gotten as far as we have today. So once again, Commander Villegas, thank you very, very much. But also, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to bring to the table, is there a representative from the City Attorney's Office? Also, is there somebody from Judge Nash's office? Present? Okay. So there's nobody from the City Attorney's Office? Okay. Could you come forward, please? Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Your name, please?
Kristen Birdsong.
Okay. Thank you very much for attending this morning. Have you had an opportunity to review the new LAPD internal directive regarding truancy and daytime curfew citations?
I did, and I was asked to represent the City Attorney's Truancy Prevention Program because that's the program I see. I literally just came in from court, so when you said is someone present from the City
Okay.
Attorney's Office, I'm here to
All right.
discuss.
So they have you doing multiple tasks?
Right.
Okay, all right. So you've had a chance to review the LAPD document?
Yes.
Okay. Could you please share with us whether or not you think that that's is complementary of the other activities that the City Attorney's Office is working on and the direction that the City Attorney's Office is using to address these issues as well?
I do feel that it's complementary. It's important to distinguish the role of the city attorney at a truancy sweep from that of LAPD. LAPD is responsible for organizing the sweeps, determining the time, the location, the protocol, the communication. The city attorney's office has a presence at the sweep simply to tell parents of their legal responsibility to ensure that their kids are in school and to work with LAUSD's attendance counselors, people service and attendance counselors, to address any underlying problems contributing to truancy. If there's a need for mentoring, tutoring, counseling, after-school programs, then we work with LAUSD to try to pair those resources with the family so that the kids are engaged, they're attending school, and that we don't have to prosecute parents. Because it's a prevention program, prosecution is only a tool of last resort if parents continually refuse to send their kids to school. So it's complementary in that
Well,
respect.
Commander Villegas, that's along my last question to you, which was any recommendations moving forward, and you basically mentioned almost word for word what was just mentioned as well.
Correct.
Okay. Again, I can't thank you enough, and people don't realize how far we've gotten on paper. Now, at the same time, it's going to take a lot of cooperation and understanding on behalf of all of us, policymakers, departments, people who are interacting with the young people, us trying to make sure that the school district understands that's the spirit in which we're approaching it. Hopefully, they'll continue to do so as well, and adopt this style of approach. Again, I can't thank you enough for how far we've gotten, and the fact that at least on the city side, it looks like we're in a pretty good synergy and working very, very like-mindedly on this matter as well. Like I said, right now, a lot of it's on paper. Let's hope and expect that as I came in, the chairman was asking questions about there are task forces and there are particular officers that focus on these matters, yet at the same time, there are thousands of other officers that are out there and do come across these young people as well, and we'll have to interact with that. What is the department doing to make sure that that as many officers in the department actually are apprised and are aware of this paradigm shift on the approach.
Well, this is part of what we call roll call training. We have roll call training. There's a training program wherein before everyone goes out into the field, there's about 10 or 15 minutes of time that's spent articulating the various rules, regulations, or policies that are important for our officers to be mindful of. This is one of them, so this is going to be shared with them all. But more specifically and more importantly than the roll call training is the actual emphasis that's being placed upon at the bureau chief and at the area CO level. In other words, the bureau chiefs are going to be intimate as it relates to this directive, as are the area commanding officers. And that alone right there is going to ensure that the information is trickled down, for a lack of a better word, with all of our personnel.
When it comes to the city attorney's office, can you describe to us how your office's approach is handling this issue of daytime curfew and truancy?
We have legal jurisdiction over the parents. We don't have legal jurisdiction over juveniles, as you know. And so the way that we try to address truancy prevention is by partnering with LAUSD and conducting parent meetings for parents whose students are not in regular school attendance. We send various letters throughout the school year to inform parents of their legal responsibility. We conduct one-on-one hearings through our hearing program with families who are having attendance problems. And again, as I mentioned, the approach we take at sweeps to address the underlying problems. If mentoring, tutoring, counseling, other issues are preventing students from coming to school, then we try to address those issues working with LAUSD so that kids can be in school rather than having to prosecute parents. The last step in that sequence of events would be SARB, a School Attendance Review Board, which is a component of LAUSD, and several different governmental agencies are present at a SARB, which is a meeting with the family. We have a DCFS, we have school nurse, we have the city attorney's office, the district attorney's office, probation, LAPD, sheriffs, all of whom are trying to address problems which are contributing to truancy, whatever is preventing this family from having their children in regular school attendance. After all of these meetings and efforts, if the family is still not sending their kids to school and they're not in compliance with the law, then we'll prosecute. I do want to note, though, even if we prosecute, the first step in court is to give the family another chance. If they can ensure regular school attendance, sign their student into school every day, complete a parenting class, then we'll dismiss the case. And if they still can't comply, then we'll move forward with prosecution.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear, that you're giving as much respectful opportunity to the parent to try to resolve it within the household,
Right.
which ultimately is all of our objective. These young people are under the custody and responsibility of a parent or guardian, and really without their guidance and without their cooperation, there's only so much that the child can do as well. I noted that 85% of the individuals who have been cited so far in the statistics that have been forwarded by the police department and also by the school district, about 85% are Latino. When it comes to that outreach that you just described from the city attorney's office, how much of that outreach is actually available to somebody bilingually, perhaps in
100%.
Spanish?
Everything is translated. All of the letters which are sent from our office, all of the presentations we conduct, all of the hearings, all of the SARB, certified translator is present
Okay, excellent.
and provides translation.
Okay, good. And, okay, is there anything else you'd like to add on behalf of your office?
We're very happy with our working relationship with LAUSD, and to the extent LAPD can have sweeps with the new guidelines in place, we'd be happy to participate.
Okay, excellent. And also, I'd like to thank your office for attending Judge Nass's countywide truancy task force meetings. That's where a lot of this has been solidified and pulled together, and more people at the county level, city level, city attorney, DA, school police. That's probably the most comprehensive place that we've been able to discuss and actually advance this issue as far as we've gotten. So thank you for attending those as well. Again, is there anybody here from Judge Nash's office? Judge Nash is actually the head of the juvenile courts for LA County, which obviously being this is the most populated county in the country, approximately 10 million people, and disproportionately we have perhaps as many appearances by juveniles in this county court as any court in the country. He's been doing a tremendous job, and even though it's not written in his job description, he has convened the countywide truancy task force, of which I've attended some of the meetings, and my staff, Michael De La Rocha, has attended. And as I'll mention again, it's been an opportunity to pull together various agencies at the county level, various departments and representatives from the city level as well, and also various departments and individuals who are working on this issue in the school district, including the school police. And as a matter of fact, I was at a meeting where the school police chief was there as well. So it's a very well-attended meeting, and a lot of progress has been made. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that Judge Nash has been a leader on this matter and has been extremely innovative. And without his leadership, perhaps many of us would not have been understood how much attention this issue really deserves and how much attention we as policymakers and practitioners out there in the field need to change the way we do business. Also, before I move on to my closing comments, Mr. Chairman, I'm sure we're going to go to public comment cards, but I just want to also thank the Strategy Center, the ACLU, the Public Council, Youth Justice Coalition, and many organizations, community organizations, for all your support in getting us to this point. And once again, I can't thank our LAPD enough. You've done a tremendous job in bringing us to where we are today. In addition to that, I just want to make sure that we all understand that we need to track the information, as I asked LAPD if you have the ability to track. Thank you so much for doing so in the past, and it's extremely important that we do so in the future, because the last thing I would want anybody to assume is that that we have just an idea that we need to just relax. This isn't about relaxing. This is about trying to apply policy, that we have ordinances and that we have responsibilities that the police department has to enforce, yet at the same time that we use the proper discretion. Because when you look at the numbers, when you look at the zip codes and what's been going on in certain parts of the city, certain communities, certain individuals, certain families are impacted tremendously at higher rates than in other parts of the city, in other parts of our jurisdiction. And I believe that the objective of the police department, the objective of us policymakers, the objective of the school district and everybody involved is to make sure that our young people are in school. And every time that we perhaps don't use that discretion and just use the hammer and say, we're going to cite somebody, even though that young person was on his or her way to school just a few blocks away, I think that really sends us in the wrong direction, and unfortunately, inadvertently, puts that kid in a position where that young person is not going to be in school, perhaps another day or even more, just to handle the process in and of itself that they've been caught into. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll have some good comments.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you. The school district policy, how does that compare to LAPD's policy? Have they adopted a similar policy for the school police, or is there separate?
No, we're working with them so that they have a similar policy as us, but they have a different role than we have. So
I understand that, but would their role be similar? A student who's excused for some medical or on an errand or something, are they following that same policy for the enforcement?
I can't answer that question. I know that we're working with them so that we have a same or consistent policy.
Okay, but their policy may be different from LAPD's policy.
It may.
But we don't know if we're going to pull them together. And it's the same jurisdiction of the city of Los Angeles. I'm not so concerned with the county, which is patrolled by the sheriffs. But if student gets stopped by an LAPD officer versus a school district police officer, there should be some parallel.
I believe there will be. I don't know that for certain. To answer your question, that at this moment in time that we are consistent as we should be.
Okay, somehow, at least in the city boundaries, there should be some consistency. I know the school district reaches beyond the city into other municipalities. The other question I have is the formalization of an MOU. It says LAPD determined that an MOU between LAPD and LAUSD is no longer feasible, and also the issue with the court and statistics is no longer feasible due to lack of funding. How are we going to correct that if we don't have the statistics to show what is occurring as far as our enforcement and what's happening with the courts? Because according to the memo, due to lack of funding and personnel, it's not going to continue.
Correct. There was an old MOU that was in place at that time, and it was discontinued as a result of funding, et cetera, in terms of the information. The school district attempted this last year, beginning in September, I believe, late September, early October, to initiate a new MOU, and we were working with them on it. But as a result of funding, their attendance review centers that they began and launched was a program to specifically address truancy, is no longer in place.
So that if it's no longer in place, how are we going to tabulate if the program's proven effective or not?
Because we can tabulate our information. I can tabulate what the Los Angeles Police Department does as it relates to curfew. What we can't tabulate is the information that we receive or we don't receive from the school district or from the county in terms of what the result is of citations, et cetera. I can track, or we, the LAPD, can track what our enforcement posture is as it relates to our numerical measures and where they are occurring.
And as far as the court, it sounds like they're not going to be involved in the statistical analysis, according to what this memo says.
Yeah, this memo was last year. If you look at the time, the date was April 29th of last year. Since that time is when Judge Nash convened his county-wide task force. Part of the recommendations within that task force, one of them is going to be, I would hope, that there is a cross-pollination of information. But that hasn't occurred as of yet.
That has not occurred.
It has not.
And there's probably lack of funding because that's probably part of the problem.
Yeah, likely it'll be a recommendation that may or may not be implemented as a result of funding.
Okay. And when a student is observed out of school during school hours, does the officer transport that student to school if they are going to take enforcement action, or do they just issue a cite and leave them?
It depends on the scenario.
There's no mandate that they take them back to school?
No, it's not a mandate. One of the things that you'll find in this directives is that there are very few shalls in the directive, and there are a lot more shoulds. And the purpose, or mays, so it's permissive in nature, so that it gives discretion to the officer depending upon the investigation, the location, and where they come across a juvenile. But one of the recommendations, or what's written within the document, is the spirit of it, and is to the extent possible to transport kids to school.
And then as far as the exceptions, and looking at it from the officer's perspective, minor is on an emergency errand directed by his or her parents, coming directly from a place of gainful employment, medical appointment, off campus, I understand if there's a permit, minor is authorized to be absent from school pursuant to education code. How is the officer going to determine this based upon the student's statement with no verification? I'm on an emergency errand directed by my parents to go to the pharmacy. Okay, thank you very much, to be on your way. I mean, what kind of verification? Because a lot of students don't carry ID in the first place. And how is the officer going to determine if that statement is actually valid or not? Because there are numerous exceptions.
Right, there are exceptions to the actual ordinance itself, and that's part of the training component that we're including in that roll call training process. And there isn't one answer that's going to tell you whether someone's in violation of it or not. And it's going to be up to the individual officer depending upon all the scenarios. In one of the cases that you talked about, as if he's en route to gainful employment, if the person has a McDonald's shirt and he's walking towards a McDonald's and it's during school time hours and it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a likelihood that he's truthful. There's also a follow-up opportunity there for the officers to follow up to see if, in fact, he's coming to work at that particular McDonald's, et cetera. There are other factors that that would weigh in. I think Councilman Smith talked about the bus. If he's getting on bus number 33 or whatever number, there's an orientation to identify where these buses are going to, and there's follow-up information that the officers can use to determine whether they're going to cite somebody or not.
So they'll do an investigation, determine if the facts are actually valid on the excuse, and if they are, no actions taken, and if they do an investigation, find that there are problems, and they take enforcement from that.
Correct.
That's all I have.
Okay. I had one last question, two things. First, just a question for you, Commander. I noticed in the statistics since 2006 an annual drop-off of the number of citations and a very precipitous drop-off in 2009, even though there's one DP short. Your average would only bring it up to 1,500 cites. So was there a reason for that?
There's no reason that I can come up with that would articulate other than that we believe that one of the reasons is when we started working with the LA County Informal Juvenile Traffic Court, there was a notification process so that whenever we did our task force that they were notified and or participants of that task force. As a result of funding, they weren't participating as often, and as a result we didn't have as many task forces.
Okay.
So I believe it's related to funding and the number of task forces, but I don't have anything to verify that information.
Okay. And then just for technical purposes, now that we have a quorum, Mr. Cardenas, we had 1, 2, and 3 as consent items. If you agree with that, then those will go forward to the recommendation of the committee. And to the audience, I apologize. I have a 10 o'clock meeting with Chief Peck, so I thank the committee for being here at 9 instead of 9:30. Mr. Zine, appreciate you getting out of bed. You have a long drive.
Always a
today.
pleasure.
I am turning the meeting over to the vice chair now for the continuation. We are waiting for Ms. Perry's attendance also. She's in another meeting down the hall, and as soon as she gets here, we'll be back at a quorum. So for the moment, we'll be without a quorum again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have public comment cards, but some of these cards are consistent with some of the speakers that have been involved in this matter for quite some time. First, I'd like to ask Judy Verduzco to come up, please, and then also Zoe Rosson. We'll be calling up all the public comment cards, but I wanted to call you up first because we wanted to give you an opportunity to present.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Judy Verduzco, and I'm with Public Counsel. We're an organization that's committed to helping students succeed in school and staying out of the court systems and jail. Public Counsel worked together with the Labor Community Strategy Center, the ACLU of Southern California, the LAPD, the Mayor's Office, and administrators from the Partnership of LA Schools to change the way that Los Angeles enforces its daytime curfew law. The LAPD's new curfew policy is an important step forward for Los Angeles students and families. We'd like to thank the LAPD and especially Chief Beck and Chief Pasinger for working on a policy that makes sense for families and also helps youth stay in school. As a social worker, let me tell you what youth need to stay in school. It's not just police. It takes a team of parents, teachers, students, and administrators. Being late to school doesn't make you a bad kid. It usually means that something is not right. Children need help, not handcuffs. There are dozens of reasons why youth might be late to school, including emotional mental health problems, academic challenges, economic pressures, inadequate transportation, fear of being harmed in school or on their way to school, and many more. To find out what's getting in the way, first you have to get to know the student. When we met our client Alejandra, she was homeless. She had been living with her mother in her car. Like many, it was hard for her to get to school on time because she had to help her little sister get to school too. Rather than support her with bus tokens, the school and the police were fining her and ticketing her. She couldn't pay the tickets. She had to miss more school to go to court. And when Public Counsel began working with her, she was on the verge of dropping out of high school. Maria, another client of ours, came to us because she was given multiple tickets amounting to over $1,000. Like many other young people, Maria was scared and avoided dealing with her tickets. Due to the outstanding fines, she is unable to apply for a driver's permit. As a teen mother of a special needs child, the inability to drive makes it extremely difficult to get her baby to daycare and herself to school. She's trying to further her education and be successful, but she continues to encounter barriers. Students don't need police to stay in school. They need to be asked, what are those barriers that's getting in the way, so that we can offer them support for their individual needs.
Now, I wanted to ask you a question. When it comes to that support, how are you working with the school district?
We're working with the school district by exhausting the interventions that are available at the school, such as student success team meetings, if the child is a special education student, convening IEP meetings for them to see what's going on. Again, resources such as counseling, whether at the school or community counseling, other resources that might be available to them that can that can support what's at the heart of the student not going to school or not being able to get to school on time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Zoe?
Good morning. My name is Zoe Rawson. I'm an attorney working with the Community Rights Campaign and Public Counsel to provide pro bono representation for students who have received curfew citations. I've worked with students over the past year ticketed at bus stops, on their way to school, entering school, and even on school grounds. I'm here to answer the question today, Councilman, about what happens when a student receives the ticket, because I believe it's crucial for this committee to understand, to have that information moving forward. Students are required to appear with their parents, or they will receive a misdemeanor failure to appear charge, even if their parent has work, childcare, or health conflicts. A failure to appear has additional fines close to $400, and not being able to pay fines prevents students from obtaining a driver's license. Currently, I have clients exactly in this situation with fines ranging from hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars. One of them who chooses whether or not to pay these fines or to pay college tuition because he's already graduated high school. Sending students to the juvenile traffic court is just punitive. It's not a place where information is gathered about a student's circumstance or their needs. The court does not inquire about special education, mental health, or homelessness issues. The court is packed every morning, and according to the court, the majority of cases are for daytime curfew. The vast majority of families at court are Black and Latino, many monolingual Spanish-speaking parents. Due process protections can be compromised in this informal setting. Students are not provided legal representation. There is no court record of the proceedings. There is no right of appeal to a higher court. Student admissions are accepted without inquiry as to the facts of the case or whether they know what constitutes a defense. The court does not ask about the student's experience with the police.
Continue, please.
There is no recourse for a student who has been unnecessarily handcuffed, searched, or verbally mistreated by law enforcement. The hearing officer has absolute discretion to decide the outcome and to issue fines. Not all, but some hearing officers will enforce tickets issued before the bell if they believe that the student would be late, and even in one case, a ticket that was given to a student the next day for staying home with parental permission. During the proceedings, parents are asked to sit quietly while the young person is on their own to advocate for themselves, an intimidating task for any without legal representation, much less a middle or high school student. I do want to acknowledge the efforts of LAPD, Judge Nash, and this committee. I recognize there's a genuine interest in looking at alternative approaches. However, I do believe there is an immediate need beyond this directive to address the serious impacts this curfew is having for students and parents here in Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that description. Next, we have David Sapp. And Darren Jones.
Good morning. My name is David Sapp. I'm a staff attorney at the ACLU of Southern California. The curfew and how it's been enforced has had the perverse effect of slamming the schoolhouse door in the face of students, even those who are doing their best to get to school. I want to first thank Chief Beck, Chief Pasinger, and Commander Villegas for their leadership in working with the community to limit that phenomenon by clarifying LAPD's enforcement protocols under the daytime curfew. We hope that other entities like the LASPD and the LA Sheriff will follow suit. We all agree that truancy is a problem. The high school completion rate in Los Angeles must improve. But as you have heard and will hear from the commenters that will follow me, the LA curfew is often counterproductive and hurts families and students without achieving the goals for which it was enacted. But I'd like to focus my remarks on efficacy. First, we've not found a single study substantiating the assertion that aggressive daytime curfew enforcement improves attendance rates at schools. To the contrary, numerous studies have demonstrated that punitive daytime curfews do not actually reduce crime rates. Just one example, the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice studied LA curfew laws and concluded, quote, statistical analysis provides no support for the proposition that stricter curfew enforcement reduces youth crime either absolutely or relative to adults by location, by city, or by type of crime. In contrast, numerous studies have documented the negative impact that law enforcement contact has on the future academic outcomes for students. As just one example, the American Psychological Association Zero Tolerance Task Force released its findings in December of 2008. That task force found, quote, the overwhelming majority of findings from the available research on zero tolerance and exclusionary discipline tend to contradict the assumptions of that philosophy, and specifically recommended that policymakers instead, quote, implement preventative measures that can improve school climate and improve the sense of school community and belongingness. Finally, I want to address the legal context. Under California law, regulating attendance is the role of students and parents, not city governments and police departments. In Harrahel versus City of Monrovia, the California Court of Appeal recognized that city ordinances enacted to regulate school attendance are illegal because only schools can regulate student attendance. Given this limitation, we believe it will, actually, sorry, let me just take a step back, is that the ACLU of California joins the Community Rights Campaign and other advocates in requesting that this committee convene a series of community hearings where you can hear directly from students, parents, and community leaders about how the daytime and curfew enforcement has affected them. We believe that that information, what you will learn at those hearings, will persuade the committee that the curfew should be substantially curtailed or, in fact, repealed. In a school district where almost 50% of our students are dropping out, common sense says we must do everything we can to make sure the school door is open to every student who wants to be there. The evidence shows that the daytime curfew is actually pushing kids out of schools, and we urge you all to consider limiting or repealing it altogether. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Darren Jones. I'm with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here. We represent approximately 12 or 13,000 member families here in California, with about 3,000 or 4,000 of those being in the Los Angeles area here. As you know, one of the keys to homeschool success has been the opportunity to be flexible in our schedule and choosing our curriculum. And so as an organization, Homeschool Legal Defense is strongly opposed to daytime curfews. We believe that enforcement of the truancy law is a better way to go. In fact, the gentleman from the ACLU mentioned Harrahel versus Monrovia. Our organization actually was the organization who brought that case, and that was our argument. We believe that the parents should be the ones who make the decisions regarding the education of their children. And homeschoolers have decided to do that by teaching their kids at home. And in California, there's a couple different ways to do that. The one that most people use, though, is to actually register with the State Department of Education as a small private school, usually just one family. And so that brings up a problem when they are stopped by the police and asked, what are they doing? The answer is, I'm homeschooling and my school's not in session today. Under the new proposed directive, that may work. It hasn't in the past. They've still been cited because as a small one-family private school, they don't issue IDs. They also aren't on register with the local school because they have registered with the state rather than somewhere here in Los Angeles. And in fact, the state doesn't necessarily keep records in its public database of private schools with 5 or fewer students. And so our position is that if a student is asked if he or she is homeschooled, then that should be sufficient unless the officer has a reason to believe that the student is lying. For example, calling the parent to verify that the child is actually homeschooled and not supposed to be in school, great. We're all for that. That didn't work last year when one of our clients had their mom on the cell phone telling the officers, yes, my kids are done with school for the year. This was the beginning of June. They don't have to be in school today. They still got transported to be held until mom could come pick them up. If they are one of the families in California who is joined with an umbrella school, or what we sometimes call an ISP, calling that umbrella school to verify enrollment, that's fine too. Also, there are some homeschoolers who actually do register with a local public school in their charter school. We think that the police should have the opportunity to call that charter school as well to verify. So in conclusion, we appreciate the work that the LAPD has put into this, but I would encourage this committee to look at, substantially changing or even withdrawing the daytime curfew. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that insight. Next, we have, is Kim McGill present? I'm asking you if you'd like to. Speak now or... Okay, so they'll speak. Okay, thank you. And they filled out cards, correct? Okay. Manuel Criollo?
You got to get that.
You did fill out a card.
Yes, I did.
It looked like Carrillo for a second there.
Oh.
Okay, all right. You're going to be a doctor someday. I have a hard time reading your writing.
Too late, I think. But good morning, everybody. My name is Manuel Criollo. I'm the lead organizer with the Community Rights Campaign and the Strategy Center, and obviously a proud member of the collaboration with ACLU and Public Counsel. I want to thank this committee for bringing this important agenda item up. We especially want to thank Councilpersons Cardenas and Perry for your timely interventions and your insistence on obtaining the critical data that was needed on reporting on the LAMC 4504 and the daytime curfew law. Second, we clearly are thankful for the series of meetings that we had with LAPD. We particularly want to thank Chief Passenger and Commander Villegas and the important leadership that they provided by issuing these newly revised protocol on daytime curfew, which we believe has the potential to ease the ticketing of students on their way to school. As we explained to LAPD and as we explained to many of you, we believe that the current enforcement and statute of daytime curfew has a series of potential civil rights harms that we need to really address. Secondly, we think that it creates greater hardships on low-income LA residents throughout the city, given that the heightened enforcement is in South LA and East LA and some of the poor neighborhoods in the neighborhood. I have gave a copy of you our letter that we sent you last year, which shows this series of maps that we worked with the Advancement Project on pinpointing where the tickets are at. As you can see, places like Boyle Heights, Northeast LA, South Los Angeles are areas that are currently right now some of the places that are heavily enforced. I think that we, obviously while we appreciate the work of LAPD on this issue and their collaboration in this process and their openness, really, to be honest, the new curfew policy is an important step, but it doesn't resolve all the challenges faced by students and families on how the curfew is implemented. As long as this curfew is on the books, and even with LAPD policy, officers might still ticket students. Second, this policy does not restrict or prevent searches and uses of handcuffs or the practice of transporting youth in handcuffs in the back of a police car. These practices unnecessarily treat students as potential criminals. Third, an officer under the policy can consult with a school on whether to ticket a student, even if the student was going to school. Simply put, students should not be getting curfew citations for being late to school or for poor attendance. Again, there is a set of laws already in truancy issues. And lastly, while we think there's important objectives, criteria that are set up for truancy sweeps and truancy task force, we believe there still needs to be more transparency. What's the described criteria? What's the sufficient detail in documenting the enforcement itself? Lastly, what we are asking for, many of you members here in this committee, is to convene a series of public hearings to hear from students, parents, and community leaders about the daytime curfew law and the impacts it has on those communities. We believe the information presented there will persuade this committee that the curfew should be substantially curtailed or repealed. And lastly, I think we also, looking at the report itself, we believe that there needs to be more information about the curfew and enforcement that we have sought and have been blocked in the past. For example, how much is spent on enforcement itself? Second, how much money is collected from the tickets itself? Third, where does the money go? Up to this point, of all the conversations we've had with many of the different players in this issue, none of us has given us a straight answer on that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you. Those last three questions that you have are truly questions that the policymakers of the city have the responsibility to ascertain and get that information. When we do get that information, we'll make sure that we do it in a public forum where it will be available to all the public to hear and to know. Okay? Thank you for that information and that insight. Ms. Perry, thank you for joining us. We now have a quorum once again of this committee, and Ms. Perry, the members have had an opportunity to ask questions. Obviously, we can ask questions at any time as long as the item is open, but since you just came a few minutes ago, I'd like to afford you the opportunity to ask questions at this time, or would you like to wait till later?
No, I just wanted to thank you to the gentleman for reflecting my efforts to amend the hours of the curfew, to eliminate the exception for attending a place of public entertainment, and to have it reflect the hours and days when the school that the student attends is in session, to try to be more realistic. So appreciate that recognition, and otherwise, no, I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Perry. Next speaker is Henry Sandoval and also Jade Salary. And when you hear the buzzer go off, if you could just, if you go to your full 2 minutes, just take a few more seconds to wrap up your last sentence. State your name again for the record.
Henry Sandoval from the Youth Justice Coalition.
Okay, you may begin.
I want to thank Chief Beck and the LAPD for this change in the truancy policy. You can understand how encouraging it is to walk up to your school and see it surrounded by police. To see youth against the fence with their hands on their hands, or to see youth in handcuffs in the back of the police car, it made us feel like we were going to Crenshaw State Prison, not Crenshaw High School. It was this treatment both by staff and police that led me to give up on school. As a student, I was posted away from every day, and truancy tickets and sweeps were a big part of what carried me to leave. I never got a ticket because when I saw cops outside the school, I just turned around and hit the streets. Most of the time, I was just a few minutes late. Eventually, I left school. Today is a big step forward, understanding our struggles. I was late to school because city buses that were packed would pass me up. I was late on the days I had to take my little sister to school. I was late on the days I had to walk back. I couldn't afford the bus fare. This directive will give youth a chance to graduate. I graduated by luck when I found the Youth Justice Coalition. There are other things we urge you to do to move on this even further. Number one, collect that data and release it on all tickets and arrests by race, location, or offense, so we can track problems and propose solutions. Number two, hold students accountable through clear contracts and restorative justice, not punishment and push-up. Number three, replace truancy tickets with community intervention workers and safe passage programs. Number four, give every poor working class student a free Metro Pass. Invest in community-based schools for Plan B, just in case students get pushed out of LAUSD schools. So that way they have an alternative. That way, I heard you say that your youth need to be educated. So that will be like a perfect Plan B.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. State your name for the record.
Jade Salary. I'm from the Youth Justice Coalition. First off, I'd like to thank Chief Beck and the LAPD for this decision on the change of truancy policies. Truancy tickets didn't affect me personally, but many of my friends were affected by them. it was hard for them to pay off the tickets because they didn't have the money. And whenever they did get the money to pay them off, they had a harder struggle financially, emotionally, and it messed up their relationships with their families because their families was looking at them like, you have me paying this money. And so, and eventually they just gave up on school because they kept on getting these tickets, and they just felt like there was no reason to go if they was going to keep on getting tickets. And so they was getting these tickets due to the fact that the bus was late and it passed them by. They had to walk from long distances to get to school, or their families just didn't have the transportation needed to drop off their children at school on time. And for even far more serious things. At our school we have this problem, but we have restorative justice circles and peacemakers. Even though we have 20 different neighborhoods in our school, most of them so-called enemies, for the most part they are working together to keep the peace. This decision to change the truancy policy will help the students financially and education-wise because most students will take the incentive and get school another chance. This change can go along in changing our campuses and bringing our schools back to being like schools and less to looking and running like prisons. Hopefully this change will inspire other changes in schools also.
Thank you very much, Jade. Jose Solis?
Hi, my name is Jose Solis. I'm with the Youth Justice Coalition. First, I want to thank Chief Beck for getting this through. Secondly, I'm one of the victims of the truancy policies. I was 15 years old when I got my first truancy ticket. 2 days later, I got my second truancy ticket. The reason for that was because I didn't have no good transportation. And when I did have money for transportation, the only choice I had was to catch the bus. But that didn't make any difference. Bus drivers would pass me by because the buses would get so packed. And because of that, I got my third ticket. Months later, I was trying to get my driver's permit, but couldn't because I never showed up to court because I didn't want to make my mom to I didn't want to make my mom to get off from work, or so that kind of pushed me out of public schools, Crenshaw High School. So thanks to my school, I went back, got my education, and yeah, I got my high school diploma. But because of truancy tickets, that kind of pushed me out of school.
Did you eventually get a driver's permit or a driver's license?
Yeah, I had to go to court, go to the same process, and pay them all.
Okay, but you had to pay some kinds of fees and fines or what have you eventually.
Late fees, yeah. So that kind of like pushed the ticket. I had to pay like more because of the late fees.
Okay, thank you. Maceo Bradley. I'm sorry if I'm not sure I'm reading that correctly. Alexander Baliobin and Angela Herrera. Mr. Bradley, go ahead. State your name for the record.
My name is Maceo Bradley, and just wanted to say good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to speak up on this issue. So I attend Animal Lockery High School, and I'm a 3.3 GPA student. I'm with the college tour committee. I'm involved in different organizations around my school that help our community, and so I guess you could say I'm a good student. And so when I got my ticket back in December, I got ticketed. I wasn't off campus, I was on campus in the main office. So I got ticketed at the school for trying to get to school. I was late, and my mom knew I was late, and she was a part of the reason I was late. And the only reason I didn't bring a note was because I didn't know the truancy ticketing was happening. So I think that the truancy tickets are not a good way to go upon the issue, because like you said, it is going in the wrong direction for us, because students, instead of being late, if they think they're going to be late, they don't come to school, and it leads to absences instead of tardies. And so I guess I would suppose a more school-based disciplinary system solution. And yeah, that.
Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Alexander Balgobin. I'm off Central College and Community Rights Campaign. And I just want to say, I'm just disappointed with the system of citations. I see it to be an injurious blow to teens and their future academic pursuits. I think it degrades the learning experience as far as teens and perpetuates a further prison industrial complex. I don't believe that teens should have to worry about keeping up with court dates or fines for tardiness or curfew violations. And instead of putting so much effort into these exclusionary methods, we should put more emphasis in cooperating with students, parents, and the schools to address another key issue. I believe the key issue is the quality of education available to students throughout Los Angeles County. And I feel that efforts should be focused on improving the appeal to the education system and its benefits instead of discouraging and criminalizing the youth. As an individual personally affected by the citations, I know that one's priorities can become a bit blurred when faced with these measures. And if not for a strong support system and my parents and teachers, I would not have seen the potential advantages in pursuing higher education. Unfortunately, I know that my circumstances do not resonate with the masses of students. As Mr. Cardenas stated earlier, many of these students' parents or legal guardians can't even attend court dates. So going off of the problems that they're faced with, I believe that the suggestions made by prior individuals, like additional hearings for students impacted by truancy tickets, should be held in order to share the stories and paint the messy picture that is the system of citations. And I also agree with the suggestion that more reports and studies should be documented to show the actual implications of the system of citations. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Angela Herrera, Lisette Lasso, and Gabriel Saldaña. Please come up. Is Angela here? Okay. Please state your name for the record, Angela. You may begin.
My name is Angela Herrera. I attend Roosevelt High School, and I'm a member of the Community Rights Campaign and part of the Taking Action Club on my campus. So on October 13th, me and 15 other students were stopped at Carl's Jr. by LASPD. They held us there for an hour and a half, and after they called into the school, they were informed that we were on a PSAT schedule and we weren't supposed to start school until 8:07. After the officers held us there for an hour and a half, they wrote 8:30 on the ticket that they issued when they transported us to our campus. They transported us to our campus in 3 cop cars, 16 students, and then they issued the ticket on our campus. So then what I'm asking for the city council to do is to stop, if they can please stop ticketing in our community. My family was not going to pay about $273 for a ticket that was unrightfully given to me and also my peers. So we decided to fight the ticket, and we had to miss 2 days of school and 2 days, my parents had to miss 2 days of work. And the worst part is the fact that when we were going to fight the tickets, the officers did not show up because they knew that the ticket was unrightfully given to us. So I'm asking for LASPD to stop harassing our community. We need counselors to talk to the students because there has to be a reason why students are getting there late. It's not like their choice. We're also asking the city council to repeal LAMC 4504. And the reason I'm here today is because I'm on spring break and I want my voice to be heard. So I would also like for these meetings to be held on days and times where parents and students can come and be a part of it. Thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you very much.
That was LA School Police, not LAPD.
LA School
Police.
Okay.
And then also know that LA School Police has a new police chief, and I've been dialoguing with him and his people, and they seem to have a much better approach to this. And you can better believe we're going to have more meetings on this matter in the evenings in the community, not just here in City Hall. So your wish will be granted on having meetings where parents can show up without having to lose work time. In addition to that, I'm going to request the Chief of Police of LA School Police Department meet with me and some community members, so you'll be welcome to come and we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenos dias, good morning everyone. My name is Lisette Lasso and I am a youth organizer with the Community Rights Campaign. And I have worked with students at Roosevelt High School in East LA, Cleveland High School in the San Fernando Valley, Central High School in Culver City, Crenshaw High in South LA, and Locke High School in Watts. In all of these schools, it has been my experience that when I ask these students where their school psychologist's office is, for the most part, they don't know who or have ever met their school psychologist. But when asked about school police, they know them by name. School safety cannot look like more police. It cannot look like an impersonal $250 fine, handcuffs, and an invasion of one's privacy through the use of searches. School safety needs to be redefined, not through the lens of fear tactics, but through the genuine intention of looking out for the interests of students. We cannot preach about how our youth are our future if the policies that exist are cutting their futures and their potentials short. My older brother is a high school dropout, so I know the effects of police repression intimately. My story is not unique. It is much, much too common. And I'm asking you, as representatives of our community, to listen to our community, and as Angela was asking, to have more public hearings that include our communities, to repeal this law, because we need solutions that go to the root of the problem and solve it that way, not through a Band-Aid solution. And more transparency, where this information is open to the public, and where the public can engage in finding solutions, and an inclusive solution, not one that excludes students. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for that honest example of students can identify who their school police officer is, yet at the same time they don't know where or who their school psychologist is. Unfortunately, that does ring true. Yes. Your name for the record?
Hello, my name is Gabriel Saldana. First of all, I'd just like to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak in front of you.
Pull the mic a little closer to you.
I just want to give you thanks for giving me the honor to speak in front of you. And mainly for me, you can say I'm a good student because I have like my friend Maceo, I have a 3.4 GPA. I'm a founder of several activities at school, an organization, and also sort of a community rights program with certain students and the rest of the school. And I just generally love getting my education. But back in December, I had received a truancy ticket on my way to school when I live miles away in a different city because I had to move because the landlord of my old house was kicking us out. So I had to move to a whole nother city and still come to that school so I can continue with all my activities. And I was being ticketed on my way there after being late by buses and also on my part of leaving a little bit too late. But I was ticketed inside of my school on the campus while I was trying to go to class.
By school police?
By school police. And on top of that, I had to miss 2 days of school so I can go to court. And my mom, who does not have a degree or anything, cannot get a more sustaining job, had to miss 2 days of work also so she can be there with me so I don't get more fines or anything. And it took a toll on my family because we were so scared of what was going to happen if I had to pay that $225 fine or more, I think. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty much it was the first time I had ever been put through the court system, and I'd also had my thumbprint taken like if I was a criminal of some sort, and that was completely unheard of for me for a curfew ticket.
I need to ask you a question. How did that make you feel, having to go through that whole process, going to court, knowing that you burdened your parents, your mother with that, having to lose 2 days of work, etc.? Did that, please be honest, did it make you feel angry? Did it make you feel disappointed in the system? How did you feel?
Well, it made me feel multiple things. For one, it made me angry that the system we live in, that we try to stand by, is criminalizing us like this. And it also made me feel ashamed of myself because I had to put my mom through that kind of trouble for something that I did, and also that wasn't just my fault, but it was also the fault of a failing system.
Where in the process did you have to give your thumbprint, or your fingerprint?
I had to give my thumbprint after police officer took me inside of the office of a school, and they asked me a couple questions, and they had me give my thumbprint and then sign the citation.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they got your thumbprint upon, at the time that they were giving the citation? That wasn't done as you went to the courts or were convicted of something? It was just upon being cited?
It was upon being cited.
I want to ask the people in the audience, please stand up if you would feel good about giving your thumbprint at the moment of being cited. Say a moving violation, say you're driving your car or something like that. Stand up if you think that that's something you would welcome or feel good about. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Excuse me, Commander. What's the purpose for the thumbprint on the citation?
By the way, that was school police.
Yeah, I believe he was referencing school police.
I understand that, but I know
LAPD
LAPD uses a thumbprint to verify identification. If there's no identification, can you explain that?
Yeah, we have a process by which it are released from field custodies, or what we call RFCs, when we're unable to fully identify or when we can verify someone's identification, that thumbprint's used so that it matches up with APHIS, and when they go to court, we have the actual person that, it matches up to their specific identity.
And that's in lieu of booking into jail.
Yeah, in other words, if we didn't do that, if that process didn't take place, then we would have to actually book the individual into jail, and that would take a longer process.
Okay.
Now, the reason why you would have to book the individual is because the law requires people to have identification of some kind in general?
I don't believe the law requires anybody to have identification, but we need to be able to identify who the person is before we release somebody.
Would that be the case on, say, a moving violation, a speeding ticket or something like that? Say the person didn't have their license or some kind of picture ID?
No, we're talking about different scenarios. Again, I can't speak to the issue that this gentleman was
I'm not asking to
about.
speak to school police, because I'll talk to the chief and ask him that question when I see him.
Right. But what we're talking about in terms of the thumbprint released from field custody is a misdemeanor that occurs, not a moving citation, not a traffic citation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Don Archibald, Steve Diaz, and Jerica Kofi. State your name for the record, and you can begin.
My name is Don Archibald. Thank you for having this hearing. Appreciate it. I've been a homeschooling father since 1984, and we have had one negative incident in the past 9 years ago when my son was 13 years old. His best friend lived in an adjacent city that was on Easter break for school week. So he came over to visit, and my son and his friend went at 11 o'clock in the morning to walk up down the public street, and they were stopped by school security and placed into custody, placed into a room and locked up. Photographs were taken of them because both of them had school identifications. My son had a photo ID from his homeschool association, also had a letter in his pocket from his mother saying that he was on spring break. The other student from an adjacent city had his school identification, and it was stated to the people that they were both on spring break. They were still put into custody. Still, the first time that my son had ever had any contact with a police association or anything of that nature, people of authority in that type. And it was a very negative and traumatic experience for him. I was required to take time out of my day, spend 2 hours to go and retrieve my son for not doing anything wrong, just walking down a public street, had identification, proper identification, was not accepted. I'm also belong to an association. I'm on the board of a homeschool association. We have over 600 students. A large number of those students live in the city of Los Angeles or cities that are adjacent to Los Angeles. We have what we call academy days, where there are a number of days during the weeks where all of our students gather together to have combined classes. And a lot of them drive through the city of Los Angeles to be able to get to our school. So if you have a curfew law, now you're criminalizing our students from being able to go to their association, and they carry their identification, they carry their driver's license, they carry their school ID, saying, we don't belong to the City of Los Angeles School District, so why do we end up being penalized by this law? If you're going to have a law, I don't think the curfew law is a correct way to go. If they have a truancy law, if you have an exemption for private school students or with identification or things of that nature, that you could post that law on the internet so that the students could carry a copy of the law with them when they go, and if they're stopped by a police officer, because a lot of the police don't keep up to date on what the laws are, and a lot of other school districts don't, you could show them the law and say, here's what the law says, we're exempt from your rules. Why give me a ticket when I don't belong to your city, other than to just generate additional income for your city? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, council members. My name is Jerica Coffey, and I'm a teacher at Locke High School. I teach 10th grade English, and I'm here today to talk about the impact that the truancy tickets are having on my community, on families and students, as well as teachers. The overwhelming majority of students that I work with that have been ticketed are being ticketed inside the office. They're trying to come to school. I've had students who, and I would say the majority of students don't understand their rights. They don't exactly know how to interact with police. I've had students who've been handcuffed because they refuse to give their name. And if you can imagine, I need students as a teacher to be ready to learn. And when they come in having to interact with, and I don't know if Locke is unique in that we have sheriffs on campus, we have LASPD, and we have LAPD. Interacting with students on and around campus. And so when students have to experience that level of stress before they come into the classroom, and oftentimes these students are within the first hour of school, they're not ready to learn. They're not ready to focus on what I need for them to focus on. I really would encourage you to repeal Municipal Code 4504 and allow schools to do their jobs. Allow site-based interventions. We're the people that know our students best. We know their families. And we can implement interventions that can really address the root causes of the issue and not criminalize our students. Thank you.
I got a couple of questions. You're a teacher?
Yes.
Okay. And I was waiting for a teacher so I could ask some of these questions. Have you folks gone to the school board and discussed these issues? Because I understand it's LA School Police that's citing on campus, not LAPD or sheriffs.
Some of our students are being cited by LAPD as well.
On campus?
Yes. They're sitting in the office, in the front office.
LAPD?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have you folks gone to the school board?
No.
School board members? You haven't?
So Locke is sort of a unique situation because we're a charter.
Okay.
It was recently taken over by, so it's part LAUSD, part charter. But we have not, as a collective of teachers, addressed it.
Is that one of the mayor's schools?
No.
Okay.
It's Green Dot Public School.
Green Dot. And the other question I have is, I don't know if there's any question, we have a huge problem with education in the LA city, surrounding communities, where the dropout rate is astronomical, the graduation rate is deplorable. What do we use as a tool to get students to come to school to learn so they can get an education, move on to college, and have a life that they dream about, that they hope for? But without that education, as you know as a teacher, without an education, you're not going to receive any of those benefits. So how do we do that? And I don't want to beat up on the police because I think they're trying to modify their policy. But as a society, we have a huge issue with students that are not getting an education, and they're dropping out for a variety of reasons, and it becomes another negative environment for them because who's going to hire someone that doesn't have an education? I mean, a high school diploma doesn't really do much anymore, unless you have a college diploma, and that doesn't do much anymore.
Right.
So can you, as a teacher, I'm asking you for that input.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex issue, but I believe that putting resources into criminalization of our students actually takes resources away from providing more college counselors, providing services, providing training for teachers. I mean, one of the root causes of truancy is that our classes are not that engaging for students, right? As educators, we need training and support to make our schools better for students. They don't want to come when our schools are unsafe, when our classes are not engaging for them, when they're not culturally responsive. There's a whole host of issues, but to slap a Band-Aid on it or literally slap handcuffs on students doesn't get at the root causes. I mean, we have one school counselor at our school we have 400 students, right? And some schools it's 600 students to one counselor. Where is the message about college coming across to students? So I would say that we need to put energy and resources into addressing the root causes, into making our schools better, safer, and more engaging environments rather than criminalizing students when they don't want to come when we're not doing a good enough job at getting them there.
Because I can understand the financial impact on the families and the court system, and I understand all that, but it just seems there's a huge gap to try and get that population educated to move on to something productive for them and their future families. So it's very frustrating, at least for me in elective office, to see the dilemma that we go through. And I know charter schools are some improvement, but LAUSD has, and for a lot of financial issues that are going to get worse, a lot of huge gaps. And I think you mentioned the Band-Aid. I think that's what we're coming down to, is trying Band-Aid solutions.
Also, along those lines, you certainly would have my support, because I'm not only a council member, I'm a community member. If anybody wanted to go ahead and approach the school district and ask that, say, for example, on any and every middle school and high school campus, that they equal the number of school psychologists that they have of school police assigned to that campus as well, I'd be more than happy to support that.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Steve Diaz, Terry Nevin, and Larry Lacombe. State your name for the record. Since you're ready, you may begin.
My name is Terry Nevin. I want to thank this committee and the LAPD for their endeavors to try to correct the problems for the issue of this directive. I represent Sunland, the homeschool program that was involved in the California Court of Appeals case in 2008, where homeschooling was declared legal for the first time in our history. Our school has created a form that I would recommend only in relationship to homeschools, in which it's a letterhead sort of form that is filled out per student, per incident, that indicates the date, the location, where they are going, and it has been successful in exonerating any of our students from receiving a curfew ticket when they have one of those. It has the school name, phone number, principal's phone number and address. If the parent is going to have the child go to the pharmacy at 12 o'clock to pick up a prescription, then the form says this student attending this school in any homeschool program could use this kind of a format. This student attending this school has been granted, have been allowed the privilege of going to the pharmacy during this time frame and list the pharmacy, so that it's not just a random form, it's not something they fold up and stick in their pocket. It is dated per date and per incident, and that has worked for us in relationship to homeschool students.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again, Mr. Nevin.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Larry Lacombe, and I thank you for having this hearing and giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm representing homeschoolers. I'm a homeschool dad. I have 3 students, one of whom has gone all the way, homeschooled all the way through. He's now in college. I have 2 other students, junior in high school and an 8th grader. And, you know, my wife is doing most of the work. I'm just the dad. But as a homeschooler, I can see an issue where, you know, we have kids who are not enrolled in LAUSD schools. They are part of an umbrella organization that is registered with the state, and we do our best to be responsible parents in making sure our kids get an adequate education, and indeed we believe an exceptional education. But there are situations in which we could see our kids being vulnerable to being arrested under the curfew laws, which we believe would be very inappropriate in their situations, because of the need to have a flexible schedule. For example, I have a daughter who drives down to La Mirada twice a week for classes that are held on under the auspices of Biola University. It's a homeschool high school program. And while she's driving, she's obviously not in on any school grounds. She's, possibly even going to make a stop because her mom asked her to go to the store on the way there or on the way back or, whatever. And, and yet she's doing what we have tasked her to do as a, responsible homeschool parent. And she's a very responsible young lady. So that's one example of a situation which I believe, she would be vulnerable to being ticketed in a way that would not be helpful in any way. So I'm sure there are plenty of other examples. For example, our kids like to do physical education outdoors. We have a weight bench in the garage. The garage might be open. My son might be pushing some weights, and what if
or could go jogging?
Riding their bikes up and down the street, because during the school day they get antsy. They're sitting too long. They want to get up and get the blood moving. And so outdoor physical education is obviously part of LAUSD's curricula, and it is part of ours as well.
Okay.
So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Again, Steve Diaz. Steve still here? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Gerardo Jaramillo, I think it says. Sorry, Navarro? Gerardo Navarro? Austin Angel Flores and Jorge Lopez. State your name for the record. Go ahead.
I'm Gerardo Navarro. I am a 10th grader at Roybal High and a member of the Community Rights Campaign.
A little louder, please.
I'm here to tell you about what happened to me and about 20 other students on April 8th. Me and two of my other classmates were walking to school. We were about 2 minutes to the parking lot, and we see an LASPD car go inside. So we got to the first entrance, that's on Beverly, and it was already closed, so we had no other choice but the parking lot, since the other entrance on Temple is another 15-minute walk. And as soon as we walk in there, the police calls us over, and they already had about 8 other students, and they had them facing the wall, and they told us to face the wall without listening to our iPods, and we took them off. And then it took about 20 minutes there, waiting for them to check and question the other students, and the dean of our school didn't make it any easier because he didn't even believe that we were saying our real names. And then after those 20 minutes, it was our turn, and we got questioned, but that process took about another 20 minutes, 10, and then we were let go with a fine of $300 plus community service. And as we were going already into class, we saw that more students kept coming late. We would like to drop our tickets and the rest of our tickets because it's really unfair thing to do, especially when we're already inside school campus. It's unfair because even our school staff is against us, which is something that makes us not feel good at all, and because after knowing that we'll receive a ticket for coming late, we just feel like not going to school at all. And this is something that I've heard from many students that have received our tickets, and we would really like the city council to consider getting rid of the LAMC 4504.
Okay. Thank you. Next, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jorge Lopez. I'm a social studies teacher at Roosevelt High School.
What high school?
Roosevelt High School.
Okay.
I've been at Roosevelt for 9 years now, working in the Boyle Heights community. And I first started getting involved in trying to turn around the daytime curfew law about a year ago, when I was really infuriated when I saw not school police but LAPD inside my school cafeteria in the morning. And it's something that began to happen every month or so, where we had about 7 to 8 officers inside the school cafeteria, and we had about 15 to 20 students detained, being processed there, giving tickets, and working with the counselors and then sending them back into the classroom. And I began to work with community rights campaign at that time to try to help out these students as much as possible and to get students representation. Roosevelt High School, we have a really high dropout rate, over 50%. So one of the things that, our goal as educators is to get students to graduate and create a nurturing environment and inviting environment rather than having an environment that is heavily policed, that only contributes to, the dropout rate at our school. I have had multiple students that have, I would ask them, were you absent? Oh, I was running late, mister, so I, decided not to come because I was afraid of getting a ticket. I have had parents come to me crying, telling me that they don't know how they're going to put food on the table because they have to, pay a ticket. The $250 takes away from food on the table. All these things add, economic burdens and emotional burdens to our students and our families, and it's definitely it's a constraint to our schools, and it only undermines our role as educators to send our students into college and to have them prepared. So I am very much in support of repealing the daytime curfew.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. State your name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Agustin Angel Flores. I come from San Fernando High School. I never heard of this daytime curfew tickets, but it seems so unfair that they're giving them, because either way, if there's students coming late to school, they already get their punishment by detention or paper pickup. So it wouldn't be fair that they get double
penalties.
Penalty from school plus the city. To solve this problem, I will ask you, council members, to consider to have a hearing like this one, but with family members that have been affected.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Agustin. Ladies and gentlemen, and Commander, you can step aside. We're going to go to item 4, because Ms. Perry is going to have to be leaving and we'll lose a quorum. And then we'll come back to this item. We're just going to recess this item just for a few minutes and go to item 4, and then we'll come back to item number 5, which we've been discussing for the last hour and a half. So with that, Clerk, will you please read item 4?
Item 4, Board of Police Commissioners report and Police Department report relative to the denial of the payment of reward offer made for testimony regarding the shooting death of Mr. Dedrick Egger.
Good morning, Commander Michael Moriarty, appearing on behalf of the Police Department.
Thank you. Ms. Perry?
Yeah, thank you very much, and I appreciate you indulging me with these time constraints. I think Ms. Beavers is in the back, and I wanted to tell her after much review of the preliminary hearing transcript from the court case, I took a lot of care in examining the facts of this case because I was struck by your sincerity and your comments on the record. And I realize that it can be very difficult to get witnesses to cooperate with investigations, particularly in South Los Angeles. So when the recommendation to deny a reward motion came forward, I made sure to give this particular situation the attention that I felt that it deserved. At the last time this item was before the committee, I had asked the court to provide us transcripts, or provide me with transcripts of the witness interview, which the court did provide. I did read them very, very carefully, and without taking any statements out of context, because I don't think that's appropriate for me to do this, and understanding that when we introduce these reward motions, there's very specific language in those motions that state people who would be entitled to the reward are those who provide information that lead to the arrest and conviction. So it became rather clear to me that you were not able to provide information that actually led to the arrest and conviction of the people who killed Mr. Egger. And I would, without going into great detail, unless it becomes necessary, I do have the page references here. You can read the transcript into the record. But I guess at the end of it all, I would concur with the Commission's request or recommendation to deny this reward payment. And I do appreciate you taking us to task, and I regret that I have to come to that decision, but I did do the research on my own, independent of that, and the statements under penalty of perjury speak for themselves. And sorry, yeah.
We have a public comment card from Miss Deanna Jordan Beavers. So you may proceed. You have 2 minutes to restate. You have been here before this committee before on this matter, right? Okay, just wanted to state that for the record. Please continue.
Okay, the recorded statement that I gave to Detective Diaz and Fallon when I first, before preliminary or any type of court hearing, is where I ID'd in a photo pack all of the suspects, 2 of which are serving a life sentence right now. I went to Detective Santoyo before I spoke to Diaz and Fallon and gave them the willing information before I even knew that there was a murder trial underway. The detective, Diaz and Fallon, told me that I didn't have to testify, that my recorded statement would suffice instead of going to court. Also, my family was never relocated. I was threatened and harassed not only by the detectives, but the family and friends of the people that were being tried on trial. In my opinion, if the police department would understand that not all witnesses need to be met with opposition, I was met with great opposition by Detective Diaz and Fallon because of who they thought I was and where I came from. At that time, I was a full-time college student, mother of 3, married, in school full-time, trying to be in school to transfer to UCLA to study sociology. So I wasn't a criminal as they treated me as though I was. I was a witness that came forward, and to me their tactics were unjustified. The Department of Internal Affairs said that they were just in treating me the way that they treated me, and in my opinion it wasn't. They went about it with harsh tactics, and I felt like I was a criminal instead of a witness. And it's the actual testimony that was given on the recorded statement that led to the arrest and the conviction that they got.
I don't want to take any of this out of context, as I think that's inappropriate, but I'm looking at this preliminary hearing transcript for you, Deanna Beavers and P.O. versus Michael Finley, and I realize this is just one document. Again, I don't think it's appropriate to take things out of context, but I'm looking at your statements, and I'm certainly not a judge, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not your advocate, but you stated you couldn't see exactly where they were coming from because you couldn't see over the rooftop. I guess you were asked whether you could describe them, and you said the persons you saw, and you said no because it was dark. You were there under subpoena that day, and well, anyway, I don't need to get into that. Like I said, I don't think it's a good idea to take these things out of context.
And Ms. Perry, the members of the committee do have copies of the transcripts.
Great. All I know is all I can do is base a decision based on the transcript. If we move this out of committee today, you're obviously free to come to council when it comes up in council. And if you want to provide some additional documentation, to form a basis of any documentation, I can't just take, I've got this transcript. It's under penalty of perjury. These are your words that were recorded by a court reporter. That's what I have to go on.
That's correct.
So if you have something that you can document that you want to bring to council, I think that's fine, and maybe that can change the outcome. But at this point, based on the documentary evidence that I have of your own words that were recorded, I would say that I concur with the Police Commission's recommendations. But I again encourage you, if you feel strongly about this and you want to continue to pursue it, to bring whatever evidence you have, a matter of record that you can produce, any statements you made, journal, whatever, bring it to the council meeting, and I'm clearly will take a look at it.
That is possible. I have a question in regards to the actual recorded statement. Since it is police evidence and after 10 years the archives are destroyed, I was not allowed access to any type of document for the recorded statement. Only the police department and the case detectives are allowed to view that information and even decide whether I can even view it.
Well, if you would like to send me a letter with 10 years ago, it's a long time. You can generally maybe nail it down to the month and year. I will certainly forward your request to the police department and see if that information can be retrieved.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there a timeline that that we have to either concur or deny the actions of the commission? This item is referencing the commission's actions on November 2nd, 2010. Okay. Well, my point is that there's no
Thank you.
if there's no timeline that we would be putting this item in jeopardy just based on timeline's sake, based on Ms. Perry's offer to Ms. Beavers to make a request to Ms. Perry, and she'll forward that to the department. I would recommend that whatever action we take on this committee, that a few weeks' time be afforded so that that interaction could play out as far as it possibly can. Okay. Did you have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for the record, since this was a murder case, all that evidence would be retained for appellate purposes, and Ms. Beavers is correct. She would not have legal access to that.
Okay. All right. Well, whatever she asked for that could legally be afforded her, obviously we'd want to allow her to look at it. But obviously, if there's a document that's sealed that would not be afforded to her, I just want to make it clear that this committee is not in any way saying that we would breach that responsibility. Okay.
None of the documents are, except what I can get from the police department, none of the documents, I should say, that really matter or that would make a great impact on the decision from the commission, I can have access to. Okay. And that's what's making it so hard, because it's in their favor, because they're their documents. It's not a matter of public documents.
Based on that, do you feel that you will be forwarding a letter of request to Ms. Perry?
Yes, I will.
You will anyway?
I
Okay.
will.
How long will you take to do that? Do you feel?
Just the letter itself?
Yeah.
Or the documents attached?
No. A letter to Ms. Perry.
I can get that letter out by the end of the day.
By the end of the day. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. That concludes your testimony. Thank you very much. So what we have before us is a recommendation by Ms. Perry that we concur with the commission's actions on this matter. Correct? Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Okay. And so that item is approved as concurring with the actions taken by the commission. And also, Ms. Beavers has indicated that she would like to get a letter over to Ms. Perry to make an additional request. Again, that additional request will in no way allow us to breach any of our responsibilities of confidentiality of any documents that may be requested. However, if there are any documents that are requested, I'm sure that we'll do everything that we can to provide those documents if they're legally possible, if it's legally possible to provide those to you.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
So with that, we'll put this on the council agenda no sooner than 2 weeks. So as of this time.
I'll work with the council office, set a date that's appropriate for.
Okay.
Why don't you set it 2 to 2.5 weeks from now, so if Ms. Beavers wants to write the letter, and if there's any possibility, if there's any remote possibility that there's some information that can be retrieved without breaching the confidentiality of the case file, then that will allow her some time to be able to do that.
Would May 10th work for all parties?
May 10th? Okay. All right. Okay, so this item will be put on the council agenda on May 10th, unless there's some other reason why it can't be put on that date. Okay? Thank you very much, Ms. Beavers. That concludes public comment cards filled out on item 4. Is there anybody else here on general public comment on item 4? Seeing and hearing no one come forward, and no general public comment cards filled out for item 4. Excuse me, comment cards filled out for item 4. Item 4 is now closed. We will move back to item number 5, and we'll continue the public comment. Mark Anthony Johnson, Ashley Franklin, and Philip Bracken. Please come forward. There are 3 seats available for you. Please. We'll start with to my left.
Good morning, council members. I really appreciate this space for us to talk about this issue.
Your name, please.
Mark Anthony Johnson.
Okay.
I'm a member of the Community Rights Campaign. I'm actually a former counselor, youth mentor, and counselor aide at Cleveland High School. In my experience, we found that a team of us created a position at Cleveland High School that was focused on addiction and recovery amongst students. And we found that with this team, student accountability, student responsibility, and students making healthy choices increases when their accountability is grounded in an understanding that the folks acting in local parenti, that being the school and those employed by the school, really understand them, as opposed to the punitive measures of truancy and curfew laws. And we find that over a 3-year period, not only did we build a lot of student leadership, but students became spheres of influence to help just boost student success on campus. And we're feeling like those are the alternatives we need, not curfew laws that criminalize truancy. I think folks spoke to it earlier, that it's not just an issue of students getting tickets, but it's the intimidation factor, it's the handcuffing of students, it's the humiliation of students that happens, and the excessive use of force that happens. And so we're really concerned about that. And we feel like really the stories that need to be heard, that you've shown some leadership in being able to hear, we need a public hearing at a time where it's accessible. Thank God this is happening on spring break, but at another public hearing where you can hear more stories about what's happening and what's the true impact from other folks around campus. And so I want to ask you to continue to show that leadership, and we're grateful for that, and repealing and amending this law.
Thank you. We'll continue. Thank you for calling it leadership, but we will definitely continue the hearings and also advancing this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Philip Bracken. I'm a homeschool dad, and relating to the problem of the curfew, if I give my kids to the state for them to be educated, I would hope that they would be educated and also protected. And I guess that curfew has something to do with that protection, in that they would want to, if they're not going to be in school, I want to know about it. I'd want some method of knowing that. My kids have gone to public schools most of their lives. I pulled them out in 9th and 10th grade. My older daughter went all the way through. I pulled them out because I saw a responsibility that was mine, not the state's, when the state was unable to educate them in a manner that I thought was fit. Now, whether you agree or disagree with me, thanks be to God, we have freedoms in this country that allow me to do that. The statistics, although Councilman Zine rightly stated in his 2 words how atrocious our school system is, in the industrialized world we are ranking very, very low, which is very sad. My point is this, is if this curfew primarily is for a public school system, a system that is seriously broken to try and keep the kids in school so that they don't harm the public or get into things they shouldn't. Now that I saw the problem and I took my kids out and I homeschooled them, I saw a huge difference. But now I'm asking the question is if, for example, the police can now come and arrest my kids if they're on their way to a class that they're taking or for whatever reason. So you apply a rule that primarily is adopted to a system that's broken, and now you're going to apply it to another group of people who have taken the responsibility to take care of their own kids, which I think is worth paying attention to. The results by which, if you look statistically, they outscore, and my guess is you probably don't see too many homeschoolers coming before the courts with all these social problems. So how do you apply a rule in a system that's broken to over here to a system that's actually working well? And I might add, it's not costing the state anything for me now to homeschool my kids, and I continue to pay my taxes, a big chunk of which goes towards...
Please conclude.
Right, the public school system. So, I think it's a problem if you can't see the trees for the forest. We got a broken system. The answers, I'm not sure, but I'll tell you this much. If I can take the responsibility, and primarily my wife, to educate my kids, my youngest daughter is not yet graduated from high school.
Please conclude.
She's 3 years into her college. I mean, it's working on this side, and it's not on the other side. So at least I'd hope you look at that. One last thing I'd like to add. Every problem you spoke about here, the answer, Mr. Zine, I believe, you say, how do you fix the problem? Good question, because that's what we want to do, fix the problem. It's a moral deficit. That's how you fix the problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You just pointed out once again what it is. You didn't give us a solution. Moral deficit is the problem.
I would be more than happy to, but I don't think you have that much time.
Exactly. And that might be for another committee called Saving the World. Yes.
Hello, my name is Ashley Franklin. I'm an organizer with the Labor Community Strategy Center, specifically the Community Rights Campaign. I work specifically at Manual Arts High School and Locke High School, and you've heard a few testimonies from Locke High School students. I want to present the committee with a few petitions and letters and postcards that our campaign has collected over the last week, and some of the key organizations that work with students who have been impacted by truancy tickets or students who are vulnerable to being impacted by truancy tickets. And they include Community Asset Development Redefining Education, the Advancement Project, Mental Health Advocacy Service, and personal letters from educators ranging from Manual Arts High School, Roosevelt High School, and Locke High School, and much more. And in all of these letters, it outlines a key thing. Number one, we thank you for your leadership in having LAPD produce this new directive for its officers. Also, we see this as a first step in addressing truancy citations. However, it isn't the end. We look forward to working with you all to have public hearings throughout the city, where it's at a time that parents and students and other concerned community members can attend and provide real-life testimonies of how these tickets are impacting students, as well as we want to continue to work forward to potentially amend or repeal LAMC 4504. So we have these documents here, and we would like to
You
share
turn them
this.
over to the clerk to my left.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Nicolasa Solorio Thomas, Ellen Sanchez, and Elijah Yatum. Come on up. Correct me on the mic so I don't do it again. Okay, you may begin. Okay.
My name is Nicolasa Solorio Thomas, and I just wanted to come and support the homeschool community. I represent the homeschool community. I started homeschooling in 1997 and have graduated my older son in 2010, and I still have my 9th grader and 7th grader. And I just wanted to give you a little brief picture of what we do. As part of our homeschooling projects, we have initialed a neighborhood watch, which I was a chairperson, selected by my neighbors. We also started a tutoring program using our horse as an incentive for our at-risk children that were out of school, public school, due to emotional and different crises in their homes. And when they went back to school during their summer program, they were advanced like 2 years instead of being held back. Unfortunately, my marriage ended up in divorce, and my husband was no longer supportive of homeschooling, but through our trial in our divorce, the Supreme Court granted me the freedom to choose whether I wanted to continue homeschooling, which I have that. And now as a single parent, went back to college and continue pursuing my cosmetology, which I've been self-employed for 30 years. As a massage therapist, I'm also doing a lot of community involvement for stress management to public school teachers. So we go into the school. My children are my helpers. And part of their program is to be involved in the community. So I think it would concern me if I sent my 9th grader on the bus to meet me after going to the library if he got pulled over. Even though he has a school ID and the school which he volunteers every Friday with his sister in the 2nd grade level, the school has copies of a permission and notifying where they're at, where they're at, where they're coming from and everything. care for my elder parents, which are very fragile. And so when I go to work, because I'm a mobile massage therapist and on-site cosmetologist, I sometimes have clients who cannot come to me because they're injured. So they stay with my parents, and they are told that if anything would happen to them, they would accompany them to the hospital or anything. So my concern would be that if they be in the sitting room in the emergency or anything, that they'll be questioned, why aren't you in school, and, stress them out and things like that.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Ellen Sanchez?
Good morning. I am currently the Director of Healthy Communities at Peace Over Violence and the Director of the Santana House Youth Action Center at the Violence Intervention Program, where we're the lead agency for one of the GRID prevention programs in Ramona Gardens and that area. I'm a former teacher, and I have for the last 20 years provided training all across the country on how to create schools where children can learn through bullying prevention and creating safe climates on those campuses. And I can't tell you how absolutely wrong this law is. I'm begging you to repeal it. If we're concerned about the children's safety, the student safety, about consistent attendance, and as you were asking about, Councilman Zine, about graduation rates, we have to engage them in a campus that is welcoming and makes them feel respected, where they're caring adults and they have meaningful education, as the educators who've come before me have discussed. This law creates such an adversarial relationship with the school. It pushes them out, just as many of the students have talked about. At the Santana House, every student who spends a few months with us at the youth center ends up graduating from college and graduating from high school and going on to college. And these are students who have come in with, way behind, who are part of the gang reduction and youth development program. And it's because it's not rocket science. It's very simple. They feel respected, cared for, and therefore are willing to take positive risks with their engaging in their academics again. So I'm asking you to please, we've got to start treating our young people with respect and with caring, and get rid of these kind of laws and many of the others that our city attorney is encouraging. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Your name again for the record, spoken much better than I did.
It's not a problem. The name is Elijah Tatum.
Tatum. Okay.
Yes, Tatum. First of all, I am a homeschooling parent of 3 children. 2 currently are still being homeschooled. 1 recently graduated, I think it was last year, and does a lot of volunteer work at libraries and such. I think it would be a travesty were this law allowed to be permitted or continued to exist, because of the impact that it has not only on public school, but on those that are homeschooling. And as an election, we chose to take our children out of public school, my oldest one, because we saw a digression in behavior, digression in academics, whereas before entering in, she was like 3 grades ahead. But then after 1 semester, we decided, no way. We're not going to continue to add to a problem. Now, you mentioned, sir, that Mr. Bracken, I believe it was, stated what the problem was, but no solution. I'd like to volunteer my time for that solution. I would willingly volunteer my time to go to schools, public schools, because the problem is, as he clearly stated, in a word, and that can be dealt with. It really can be, because if you look at it, historically, you go back 40, 50 years ago, the problems that existed then were chewing gum. We have a problem now. We're dealing with guns. We're dealing with disrespect of authority. drugs, all of it. So, in a nutshell, I'd like to volunteer my time, where permitted, to make an impactful impact on society.
What community do you reside? What community do you reside?
Compton.
Compton.
There's plenty of schools that I'm sure will welcome your help.
Oh, therein is the problem.
Okay, all right.
They won't allow me in. I'm too effective.
Okay, thank you. And also, for the record, there have always been problems with guns and chewing gum and violence and things of that nature throughout the history of school districts in America. LAUSD is no exception. I went to LAUSD, and those things existed when I was there. Only, other than the chewing gum, thank God I didn't participate in the other matters. Barbara Lit-Holland? I guess. Okay, you'll have to correct me again on the record. Patrice Colors and Tim Morrow. Perfect. Pretty good.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Lott Holland. I'm with the Labor Community Strategy Center's Community Rights Campaign. One of the ways to fix the problem is for our political officials to go and fight in Sacramento for more money for our public school system and less money for our prisons. I attend the LAUSD board meetings on a regular basis. This issue has been brought up to board members. We have had individual visits with board members in their offices. We have met with Interim Chief Bowman, who put out a directive not to ticket students on campus. That came directly from him. And yet, students are still being ticketed on campus. One of the things that his office has told us is that they are limited to what they can do by what is in their toolkit. One of the issues there being LASPD and LAPD have the same toolkit, and yet LASPD is dealing with our youth, our future, treating them as criminals instead of young people trying to get an education. We have also met with the new chief, Zimmerman, and it still is in negotiations with him. This all is dealing with Municipal Code 4504 that must be appealed or amended in order to give our students the quality of education that they need, or the attempt to even get into the classrooms. Right now, with this code remains on the books, it is always up to the discretion of the police officer whether or not what it is that they can do, which include handcuffing our students, putting them in the back of police cars, and searching them as well, which is intimidation and criminalization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Patrice Colors, also a community rights campaign organizer. I worked as a counseling aide both at Cleveland High School, also an addiction and recovery counselor at Tarzana Treatment Center for about 6 years. My focus was on working with students who were addicted to drugs or who had been introduced to drugs, and also just looking at largely how to live healthier lives. As an organizer with a background in counseling, it is clear to me that punitive measures such as LAMC 4504 disproportionately affects Black and brown students. The impact manifests in high push-out rates, mass criminalization, and incarceration. My 30-year-old brother, who has spent most of his life in and out of juvenile hall and now prison, traces his dysfunctionality to how he was treated by law enforcement. My brother suffers from schizoaffective disorder, but as a young person, no one took the time to provide him proper treatment. Instead, his illness led him to being a victim of a failing system. Half of the prisoners currently are suffering from mental health issues, and half of our prisoners do not have a high school diploma. There's a direct link between how LAUSD students are being educated and how prisons currently look. The issues around tardiness and truancy are complex and take complex solutions. We, the Community Rights Campaign, believe repealing the law is one step in creating a potential infrastructure that can focus on root issues. The city could initiate creating programs and work with LAUSD after-school programs that could really help and benefit students. We gave you packets in the plastic that give you alternatives. This is a long-haul issue, and we have to represent families, and most importantly, young students, primarily black and brown. We have to show them that they are the brilliant beings we believe they are. I do this work because my brother was not given a second chance. My fight is for him and all students who are undergoing the trauma that he faced. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Morrow?
Good morning, and I'd like to know, when does a public servant become a public nuisance? Because this law on the book is to intimidate. Why should we who homeschool our children come to a system that is broken in half? And what's more is, it's not just that. It can't be repaired. We continue to put money into a system that absolutely is a failure from the very beginning. I want to homeschool my child. My problem with this law is that it's only a matter of time that if this law stays on the book, that you'll arrest my child with me there. And it's only when you get your foot in the door that you can do all the other things. There is enough going on out there now. I want my child to be out and free. We live in a free country, and you're imprisoning my child where she can't come out in the daytime. I don't know about you, but would any one of you like that for your own child? You're the ones who make the laws. God, make the laws for the people. We're a nation of, by, and for the people. Please remain a public servant and not a public nuisance. Thank you.
Thank you. And one thing I'd like to remind everybody who's here before I call up the next two speakers, our last two speakers, is that you're absolutely right that the laws are made not by the police department. They're made by the public elected officials like ourselves. So I appreciate your comments and your accuracy of who's at fault when it comes to the laws on the books. Police departments do not create laws. The lawmakers create laws. Thank you.
Every law, though, every law creates a criminal.
Teresa Johnson, Kim McGill, and Tony Muse. We'll start to my right.
My name is Teresa Johnson, and I thank you for letting me speak. I'm here, obviously, as you see on my card, I'm not from LAUSD, but as Los Angeles does and California does, so do other communities and states follow. And I'm concerned for the homeschool community, and our liberties and our freedoms are in many ways in this nation being taken away. And in this area of the daytime curfew, I'm concerned about our children's liberty. I know many homeschool students who are finished with their high school requirements in 3 years, and the fourth year they're off doing other things. I have a young friend, she's teaching dance classes, and another one's going to ROP and doing many different things. And my daughter, a half an hour before lunch, her requirement is to take the dog for a walk. That's how she gets her exercise during the day. And I don't think that she should have to carry a permission slip with her to go walk the dog a half an hour before as her PE. So, when you ask for a solution, my solution is assume these children innocent instead of guilty in the beginning. Assume them innocent, and then if you really feel like there's a disrespect and you feel like they're lying, then contact their guardian, and that should be sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Tony Muse, and I'm coming as two different things. A parent, I've homeschooled my own children since 1988. All three of them have graduated from high school, and they've graduated from college. And I'm also coming as a director. I'm a director of a homeschool program, and I've done that for about 14, 15 years. Number one, I understand the police. Believe me, I understand why the police are doing what they're doing. They have a job to keep our streets safe, and they're doing it truly to the best of their ability. And like you said, again, it's our lawmakers that have made that law. But the one thing, our whole society, as Bill Gates says, our whole high school is changed. Whether you're in a charter school, whether you're homeschooled, whatever, you are doing high school differently. Most students are doing dual enrollment program with the community college. I know my children did that. I know they do entrepreneurships. They are doing internships. There's a lot of different ways that children are doing high school now. It's no longer traditional high school. You go to high school for 4 years, come in, and go home. So we need to look at society that it's different that way. The other thing that I wanted to say is I remember years ago when I was on a management training program for Security Pacific Bank down here back in the early 80s, and one of the first lessons they taught us that if there is someone that's violating a law, you do not penalize everyone. You penalize the offender. If somebody's tardy, you talk to that person one-on-one. There's plenty of laws on the books to take care of people that are truant. That are breaking the law instead of coming up with a new law. And the last thing I just wanted to say, as a homeschool director, when I heard the one gentleman saying we should have a paper for everybody that is homeschooling, and it says that they're okay to be on the street, I thought that would be a logistical nightmare for me. I would have people calling me all nights of the hour for that. So I really want the city to have a good law, not a law that is control and coercion.
And it appears that you reside outside the city of Los Angeles?
I do. I reside in Whittier.
Who polices your city? Is it
It's
their own
City of
police
Whittier.
department?
They have their own,
Okay,
yes.
so Whittier Police Department,
Whittier
not
Police
sheriff's.
Department, no, not the sheriff, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I'm sorry. I was asked to come up just to clarify a few things. We're part of the Dignity in Schools Coalition. My name is Kim McGill, and I'm an organizer with the Youth Justice Coalition. And Dignity in Schools Coalition includes the cadre, which is a parents group out of South LA, the Community Rights Campaign at Labor Community Strategy Center, and Public Council. First of all, we want to make it clear that truancy tickets are the first component of a treacherous school-to-jail track. In South Central LA and in East LA now, we are sending more young people to prison, unfortunately, than we are to college. And so while this is certainly something that we want addressed immediately, we want to see it, recognize it for what it is, which is really the first rung on a very treacherous track. Secondly, the evidence that everyone collected in this process really points clearly to the racial disparities in the way the law is enforced. We know that the majority of young people getting tickets are black and brown youth, and we know the majority of schools that are getting targeted are the poorest communities and the schools that have suffer the highest overcrowding, the lowest teacher-student ratio, and the highest push-out rates. Third, the Youth Justice Coalition, we were really forced to create a school for our members that couldn't come back into regular schools. Either they were coming home from prison or lockups and they were illegally banded from entire school districts, and I say illegally because the laws are very clear there that they were supposed to be readmitted but weren't, just simply because of their arrest record. Or they were coming home and they didn't come home with their IDs and their school transcripts, so they would stay for sometimes weeks, sometimes months out of school. A lot of them were getting truancy tickets when they were out of school for no fault of their own, just because they couldn't get back into regular school while they were waiting for those documents. So we created a school, and in creating a school, we've had numerous youth that have gotten truancy tickets on the way to our school that had IDs with our number on it, and we've never once gotten a call from an officer, verifying that. We've had young people who've had their IDs confiscated from them and told that it must be a fake ID for a school to be starting at a different time than regular schools. We've had young people who had school bus passes confiscated from them and were told that they had fake school bus passes, and we had to reissue new bus passes. We've had one student who had his bus pass ripped up and was accused of being late to school.
Continue.
So I think that the other thing we want to make clear is that when students are on the street, or anyone who looks like they're a student on the street, in our communities, in South Central LA, Compton, Watts, Linwood, Inglewood, so it goes beyond just the regular LAPD territory, the assumption is that young people are there for criminal reasons and not for any other reasons. Third, and I want to really say this to Councilman Zine, I think there's numerous evidence now to point to what are the real solutions around truancy as well as school success. And we've had to practice those things at our own school because we're taking students who have been pushed out of other schools. Some of our students have been pushed out of as many as 10 and 12 schools, not exaggerating. We take young people, about 30% of our students are coming home directly from lockup. A number of our students, the majority, probably have been labeled as gang members and are on a gang file. We have 20 different neighborhoods in our school. It's a small school. Many of them warring communities, and we've had to, work with them to get along. And these are the solutions that have worked for us and are working for other schools. One is that we encourage you to look at Cadre and the passing by LA Unified, although they have not implemented it with any kind of gusto, positive behavior supports as an option instead of pushing young people out of school. Secondly, at our school, we have very strict contracts in terms of what's expected of students. So it's clear what they need to do to graduate. It's clear every day how many credits they are away from graduating. They can see an end for their school and real progress as they're making it, which they didn't have in other schools or in lockups. Third, we have restorative justice policies in place so that every single offense that happens at school, every harm done, is immediately addressed. And it's addressed directly with the people that are involved, so that if you harm somebody, you have to make amends to that person, as opposed to a court system where you never really face the person that you harmed. And I can say that personally from my own experience going through the juvenile and adult systems. Next, we focus a lot on creating curriculum that's innovative and also that looks at all people's learning styles. So it's not just a book rote memorization, which pushes a lot of young people out of schools, but also looks at visual learners, auditory learners, learners that work better with music, that looks at a history curriculum that involves everybody and is reflective of everyone's cultures. Next, we focus on having intervention at our schools. Police and probation officers are not involved in our school campus. And we have to deal with all the things that big schools have to deal with, of course, guns, other weapons, drugs, people coming high and intoxicated, people coming late to school, of course. Intervention for us in restorative justice has enabled us to build a safe school and to have much more progress for young people that in a normal school setting would have been pushed out a long time ago. Although we're doing this with way less resources, we get less resources than a regular school district because we're through a state school district. So we have about a third less funding than they would. We have no IEP funding. We have no special resources for arts or recreation. So we feel that a lot of lessons we've learned and other similar schools have learned could be utilized at schools like LA Unified schools that have even more resources. Finally, we really want to encourage that this become a conversation about how to transform our schools. We do believe, as many speakers have said, that our schools have come to look and operate a lot more like prisons than as schools. Even the construction of school campuses is being done in many cases by the same architects that create prisons. That's just a fact. And unfortunately, we can think about metal detectors and school police and lockdowns as being the answer and the solution to all the problems in our schools. But for us who are dealing with the students that have been pushed out of schools, have left those schools, and are coming home from lockup, we can tell you that for practically every single one of us, our first impact, our first connection with the system was through a truancy ticket or a suspension or expulsion from school. And if someone had intervened in our lives at that moment, we might not have gotten the felonies and misdemeanors that we got later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And also, please understand, whenever I can't speak for all of my colleagues, but certainly if I'm chairing a committee, you don't have to speak that fast. You can take your time. You can take your time, and you have been doing a lot of tremendous work, and it is respected and appreciated by many of us. And also understand as well that one of the reasons why we're here today and why we have had this recent dialogue with former police chief, current police chief Beck, and the progress that we've made that has been reported by Commander Villegas has a lot to do with the grassroots efforts by you personally and many organizations. So thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask for one more favor?
What's that?
I appreciate those comments. A couple of people mentioned how often we've met with the school district and how often we've met with both the former school police chief and the current school police chief.
I'm going to make a motion regarding that.
Okay. Let her finish, and then I'll go to you, Mr.
I'm following right what you're saying. I already talked to Jan Perry about it. She supported this, and I think my colleague, Mr. Cardin, as well, that this committee have an evening meeting with this committee and school board, invite the school board and this committee to have an evening meeting that these issues can be discussed, because what you're talking about is issues that the police department has no control over, that we have no control over, and the school district, the school board, elected school board, they have a lot of control, and there's a huge gap. So I'd make a motion, Mr. Cardenas, that we convene an evening meeting at time convenient for folks, or a weekend, whatever works, this committee and
In the
school
community.
board, in the community. Well, it's a vast community, but someplace.
No, I mean, but not at a government building where you have to show ID and stuff like that, something where it's
We can
much
do it at a
more-
school, whatever
Yeah.
whatever the venue, but we would be able to bring together, because I don't think the school board folks have really heard what we're hearing, and obviously, we want to make it work for society. Well, maybe they have, but
They
as far
have.
as-
That's what I was going to say, that we've been numerous times.
But you
and I
haven't seen them
encourage-
together with us.
Yeah, that's what I'm really encouraged by that. I think
I'd
that
make
if
that
you guys show firm leadership, they will move.
Okay, well, that's why I make motion, Mr.
Thank you,
Cardenas.
Mr. Zine. We'll convey that to the chairman of this committee, and the chairman has already voiced to me that whatever we need to do to advance this issue, that he will support it and certainly cooperate and make sure this committee is...
I didn't want to stop you, but I don't want you to step on my motion.
No, that's good.
Is that it, Ms. Miguel?
Mhm,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you. That concludes the public comment cards. Thank you all very much. And as this is a report to the committee, we do appreciate all the efforts and work that has gone into this report. And then once again, I do thank and welcome the community for speaking up and speaking out, and not only speaking out, but actually rolling up your sleeves and working with us policymakers, with the police department, and making sure that we've gotten to the point where we're at right now. And as I said earlier, it is the policymakers that will have to decide which laws we keep in place, which laws we replace, which laws we repeal, et cetera. And I personally am committed to making sure that we refine the laws that we have on the books, and certainly want to thank the police department and Chief Beck for the fine progress you've made in making sure that you have a directive with his signature on it, that this is the way in which it will be interpreted and handled on a day-to-day basis on the streets. And also, I encourage the chief, if you could please let him know, that if we do happen to have an overzealous incident, that the police chief and the department make sure that they look into that, and also make sure that they correct that, because it is those incidents, even though they may dwindle and become few and far between compared to perhaps some time ago, those incidents certainly do jade an individual, and it really does wreak havoc on the psyche and on the mentality of the individual and of the community. There's nothing more humiliating for someone who is not involved in an act of crime to have to stand on the street or kneel on the street or be face down on the street with their hands behind their head for 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 and 30 minutes so that their neighbors can see this occurring. There's nothing more humiliating and jading than that. And perhaps at some future time, privately and publicly, I will share that with the police chief and with the community on how that has occurred. To me, one of the reasons why I ran for office was because we never had somebody who looked like me represent us in the Northeast San Fernando Valley in the state legislature. I continue to run for office because I want to be a difference. And even though my wife told me not to say anything or do anything about it, 2 Latino males in the middle of the day, 17-year-old, were walking down the street a few blocks away from my home, and a police officer acted overzealously. And the only reason why that situation did not escalate into the picture that I just painted with you is because one of those 2 Latino male boys told the police officer, "I'm an explorer." And only from that second forward did that police officer change his attitude and drove away. I never
wanted my son to experience what I experienced. And one of those 17-year-olds was my son. Overzealousness is not the law. Overzealousness is wrong. I know you to be a good officer, Commander Villegas, and I know Police Chief Beck is a great chief and has been a really good officer. Please convey that message to him, that I should not, that a 17-year-old, that you will not, that the police chief will not tolerate overzealousness on the laws that we create that are there to protect and serve equally every citizen of this community.
And that information will be forwarded to Chief Beck as well as Chief Hasinger. And I can assure you, and you have my word, that as I sit before you and the rest of this board members and people in here, as I too became a public servant for this purpose of making a difference. And I believe that my efforts for my entire career has that of many of our staff and command officers is to make such a difference. And I also believe that many of the issues that have been identified here by all the speakers are very valid issues that they have and that need to be addressed, and that certainly need to be addressed, and it can't be addressed in this forum. They need to be addressed at a different forum, specifically as it relates to a school-based resource discipline system, a site-based intervention process. I think that that's the crux of what's being discussed here, and not so much what we do in terms of the citation, but what the result of that citation is, rather than getting them the resources that they end up spending time ponying up monies and getting themselves out of school. So I think it's a very complex issue that needs to be addressed, and we're certainly going to continue to be participants with the community, with this body, so that there is an effective resolution.
Thank you, and I must say that the efforts that I've seen from the police department since my motion in 2009 have been efforts that are positive, they're constructive, and you have come a long way in making sure that people understand that our Chief Beck, you, Commander Villegas, and the people that have been involved are in fact listening, and we do look forward to making positive changes. So once again, I'd like to thank you for that, because it hasn't always been that way with many departments in government, and I want to commend you for that. Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak before this committee on this item? I do not have any more public comment cards filled out. Public comment on this item is now closed. With that, we will note and file this report. And also, that concludes the items on today's agenda. Is there anybody here for general public comment to this committee? Seeing and hearing none, general public comment is now closed. This committee is now adjourned.